Nathan. Welcome back to the ATC at Home show. We're going to go over your soil test report.
I'm excited. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, well, we've had recorded a couple episodes so far. The first one was in the snow, and we said, let's see what we can do with your lawn this year. And then I said, well, before we make a fertilizer recommendation, I wanted to do a soil test. So you very kindly collected those soil samples, one from the front lawn, one from the back lawn. How was that experience?
I mean, that was fun. It was good. It was a good learning experience. Never done that before, so it's going to be nice to know like what I have to do or what I can do, and basically what we're dealing with. Like, is it healthy enough as it is? That kind of thing. Because I've never I've never done that, so I'm excited to see what the soil test is actually going to tell you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try to explain that. Now, I prepared you a report. I sent it to you about a week ago, and it had 18 pages or something. And that's the same type of report that I sent to my professional clients, which are mostly golf courses. So you got a report that has a lot of detail on it, and
A
some of that
lot.
might make sense. Some of it you may have no idea what it means. I want to highlight the important parts of that for you and let you ask any questions.
Okay. Yeah, most of it I don't understand, which I'm assuming is a good thing. Um, but yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, I'm bringing that up onto the screen, and this is Nathan's Lawn Soil Nutrient Analysis and Report, and this uh, this has a table of contents. So we'll just go through this, and I'm going to highlight the important parts, and you just interject and ask me any questions when something is not clear, or you say why is this tested for, or what's the point of this. So it starts off with a recommendation summary, and then I go through the detailed results for the lawn zone, and I make some summary charts, which I think are quite interesting. I prefer to look at the data on a chart instead of in a table. And then
Okay.
there's a few appendices that explain about the report, the actual data that comes from the lab, and a site temperature summary is at the end, because you're in Canada, and I'm sure if you were in Hawaii or in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, or in Dallas, Texas, or Los Angeles, California, you would have a different type of grass growth rate and consequently a different nutrient requirement. So that I the way that we make these recommendations and interpret the actual test results from your lawn are not only based on what's in the soil, but also based on where you are, what type of grass you're growing, and what that grass is going to be experiencing weather-wise at your location. So that all makes sense,
Interesting.
doesn't it?
Okay. For sure. I'm worried the report's going to show how neglectful I've been to the lawn over the years. So I'm
No,
hopeful.
well, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Um, Now, you've lived at this location with this lawn for 10 years, a dozen years? How long has it been?
It's been almost 14. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
so 14 years. So that gives some background for anybody watching about the number of years that you've been maintaining this lawn. And so you said you had some trepidation that you may have neglected it, and the soil test could show that. So if that was the case, we might see really low nutrient levels, and we might see something strange with the soil pH, like the soil pH could be too low or too high.
okay.
So we'll we will look at that as we go through the report. So let's see, what did I write first? So I summarize everything in this section 1.1, the
Yeah.
recommendation summary. And I said soil pH is fine. You don't need to add liming material, so that's good. And there's another good thing in the second paragraph. There's a substantial amount of soil organic matter in both the front and in the back lawn, and that serves not only as a um, not only as something in the soil that can help hold more plant available water, but it
Mm.
also, when the temperatures are warm and when there's water in the soil, you will get decomposition, or what's technically called mineralization, of that soil organic matter. And that releases nutrients, especially the important one is nitrogen, that can help the grass stay green and continue growing without having to add too much fertilizer nitrogen. So I've looked up the
Nice.
temperature data for your site, and I've estimated that you're going to get nitrogen mineralization at your lawn of about 6 grams of actual nitrogen per square meter per year, which works out to 1.3 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. That's actually about half of the total amount of nitrogen that I'd expect your lawn to require. So that's actually a
Yeah,
good thing. Those soils have a substantial amount of organic matter.
good. Will
And
that
then,
change over time, Micah, like from year to year, or is that something that
well, for a
the
lawn, yeah, it should change over time, but it'll change slowly. So if you under fertilize the lawn with nitrogen, that is, if you harvest the clippings and remove the clippings from the lawn, and then if you don't apply very much nitrogen fertilizer, we would expect that soil organic matter to go down because the soil microbes will break that down a little bit every summer, and you're taking the mineralized nitrogen away, and you're and the grass won't be growing fast enough to really maintain that soil organic matter. And the opposite of that would be if you put too much nitrogen fertilizer, you would expect to be accumulating nitrogen and soil organic matter in the soil, and it will go up. So as far as the change over time, we'll definitely look at that if we continue doing these tests year after year. And I would like to see it stay pretty stable. So I would like the amount of organic matter input from the grass to be something similar to what the mineralization is.
okay?
And then as far as the nutrients go, this is awesome. The soil P, which is phosphorus, the K, which is potassium, and all the other plant uh, essential nutrients, they're all present in ample amounts in both the front and the back lawn. None are required as fertilizer this year. So all you
Nice.
need to do, fertilizer wise, is supply some nitrogen. And the very last chart that I showed, where when I did the weather analysis, or the
Mhm.
site temperature analysis, I worked through that and uh, figured out when the timing should be. So basically, this is sort of like the conclusion, and we'll go through
Yeah.
the details of the report later, but the conclusion, we kind of front load it here, is that I'm recommending ammonium sulfate fertilizer, which is 2100, if you can get it. So I'm going to ask you to
Yep.
go shop around and see if you can find that at your local lawn and garden center, or a
Yep.
farm store, or wherever you buy your fertilizer from. And to keep it easy, I'm going to recommend 3 applications. You've got a rotary spreader, don't you? The spinning type
Yes.
that. Okay.
Yes.
So you've got the ability to apply fertilizer, but you haven't used that very much, have you?
No, I mean, I think a long time ago we may have put some fertilizer on it, but I mostly used it just I tried to grass seed a couple times here and there just to kind of overseed and try and fill in
Mm-hmm.
one year, but yeah, I haven't really. It's gonna be dusty when I get it out of the garage. I'll tell you that.
Okay. Well, yeah. Make sure it's
I'll
it's
dust it off.
greased. Make sure
It'll
it's
be clean, ready
dusted,
to go.
clean, and it's going to be a little bit tricky to calibrate. So we may
Mhm.
just like get started at a very low setting, um,
Yeah.
where there's not much space for the fertilizer to fall through, and see how much ends up getting put out, and then you can adjust it up if necessary.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing that I'll ask you to do is to see if you can find 2100. So if you can, that's ammonium sulfate fertilizer that applies plant available nitrogen. It applies sulfur, and it doesn't apply phosphorus or potassium, which are not necessary because there's plenty in the soil. And based on the temperatures at your site and when I expect the grass to be using nutrients and when I expect the mineralization to occur, I'm recommending that you apply at 2.5 grams per square meter or a half pound of nitrogen per square meter.
Okay.
Sorry, a half pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, or 2.5 grams of nitrogen per square meter. Uh, do that on about June 10th and on about August 20th and on about September 15th. So if you do that, that's going to make the grass grow a little bit more. It's going to make the grass a little bit greener. But the main thing that we're trying to do is favor grass species growth and not broadleaf weeds and not clover. Do you have any clover in your lawn?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So having lots of clover in your lawn, clover is a legume, and clover can has a symbiotic relationship with, I think it's called rhizobium. I think it's a type of bacteria that forms nodules on the roots, and then it fixes atmospheric nitrogen. And when you apply a little bit of nitrogen fertilizer, it's going to make the grass really competitive against the clover. So you
Okay.
should just choke out the clover by
Nice. Yeah.
fertilization and mowing. So what we'll try to do with this nitrogen only fertilization is favor the grass, and hopefully by the end of the year and by next spring, you'll see a noticeable difference in what you have in terms of your species population in the lawn, and you'll see more grass and less weeds. And there's research that shows that dandelions grow in a potassium rich environment. Now you have a soil, as we'll see, that has plenty of potassium in it. So I don't know that you're instantly going to see a decline in dandelions by applying nitrogen.
Well, that's
But
too bad, but
yeah, that's too bad. So the advice that I do have for your dandelions is, if they're throwing those puffball seeds at the
yeah,
time of the year when dandelions are throwing seeds, bag your
that's
clippings.
now. Yeah.
That's now. So
Yeah.
bag your clippings. I don't really see any reason to spread seeds of weeds around your lawn. So at the
Okay.
time when weeds are going to seed, bag it and get rid of those clippings if you can. But for
Yeah.
the rest of the year, when you don't have weeds making seeds, or there's not those seeds around, go ahead and mulch the clippings and return that. That's going to be good for the
Good.
lawn.
Okay.
Okay.
That I can do for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so it turns out that even though the report is 18 pages and there's a lot of information on there, the summary recommendations are pretty simple in your case.
Is this typical, Micah? Because I mean, three applications seems very reasonable and light work, which I'm enjoying. Is that normal? Is that
Well,
what you normally
yeah,
see
that's
for?
normal. If we look at professionally managed golf course turf, and the most intense, you play golf,
Yeah.
so you know how good the surface can be on a really nice putting green that's mowed really short, and there's not a
Yeah.
blade of grass out of place. That type of turf at the highest level of maintenance will typically get fertilized once a week in very small doses. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
However, um, it, it can be stretched to 10 or 14-day fertilization intervals. And some places, if the soil's really rich, you might not apply so frequently. But golf course turf is typically in a sand-based root zone, which doesn't have so much organic matter. It's not nearly as good for growing turf as your lawn soil is, actually. And
Hmm.
so the golf course
Interesting.
turf requires more frequent fertilization. Now, for lawns, I think it would be typical. It would be reasonable to fertilize about 3 times a year.
Okay.
I wanted to recommend only 2 fertilizer applications for you because I thought it would be easier. However, I split it to 3, and the reason why I did that is because I've got a certain amount of nitrogen that I want you to apply this year in order to have that effect that we're trying to achieve of favoring the grass in your lawn and trying to choke out the weeds a little bit. And
Right.
so if we divide that into only 2 applications, those are pretty large doses of fertilizer. And the fertilizer I'm recommending, ammonium sulfate, is water soluble. And because it's water soluble, it means that the nitrogen that's in that fertilizer is immediately available to the grass. So it's not, it's these rates would not be an overdose of fertilizer, but it would be a substantial dose. And the problem is when you give a whole bunch of nitrogen to grass, it grows. And when the grass grows, you have to mow it. So what I'm trying to avoid is you putting out fertilizer that causes the grass to grow so fast that you have to mow more than you'd want to. I'm really trying to have
So
a
you're thinking
balance.
about me, which I appreciate.
I'm thinking about you and thinking about our relationship, because if I give you advice, if I give you advice and then you say, yeah, I followed your recommendation, and then I had to mow the grass twice a week for 2 or 3 weeks, that's not what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to make your lawn a little bit better and just make it get progressively better for visual appearance and for play for your family, uh, and perhaps a bit of envy from the neighbors, which I may have to edit that part out. But yeah, no, I think we like that. We like a little bit. We
Yeah, I
like it
mean,
to be a good looking lawn.
yeah, we want something to be proud of, right? We want to be proud of our lawn and the way it looks, and yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That's good.
Yeah, so that's something that I would like to achieve without having to do much work. So I don't want you to have to mow too much, and that's why we've talked in another video about the mowing frequency that we're trying to
Yeah.
achieve, the mowing heights that we're going to go with, and so the fertilizer plan is kind of tied in with that. So I think it makes sense. If you would fertilize only once a year, we would do it in the autumn, okay, or late
Okay.
summer in your climate, because you can see you've been sharing pictures with me this spring. Your lawn is green, and you've already mowed it twice or 3 times now.
Three times that.
Okay, so you mowed it three
Three.
times
So
at the time we're recording this, and
yeah,
that's with no fertilizer last year at all, and no
no,
fertilizer this spring. And the
correct.
pictures you've sent show plenty of vertical leaf extension. You're getting plenty of clippings, and it's green in color.
Yes.
So basically that says, you know what, you basically don't need to fertilize it. However, when I've been there and looked at your lawn, and when you've sent me pictures of it, I can see that it looks really good from a distance, or if you take the camera at the right angle, then it looks really green and nice. But if we get right on the lawn and look down, now I can start to see the canopy of the grass is not, so by
Full
canopy,
enough.
I mean all the leaves. It
Yep.
doesn't completely cover the ground. I can see some thin spots in
Okay.
there. And
Yep.
in those thin spots, there's some dandelion and some clover and perhaps some other undesirable plants. And there will always be some weeds in the lawn unless you treat it with herbicides. But simply with regular mowing at an appropriate height and a little bit more nitrogen fertilizer, but without
Yep.
overdoing it, I think you're going to increase the grass density and reduce the weed population. So that's kind of the idea. But
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
but putting fertilizer can be problematic because it makes grass grow. So all that does is
Yeah,
increase your workload.
I'll be ready. I'll be ready for that shortly
Okay,
after
so
the application for
yeah,
sure.
so that's why we're going to try to get that application right correct on about June 10th. So jumping into the second section of the report, we have 2 samples. So this is a summary and recommendations for the 2 samples from the lawn. And there was 1 sample from the front lawn, 1 sample from the back lawn, and it's pretty consistent. The pH was 7.1 and 7.2. This is an optimum level. The organic matter average is 5.5%, which is substantial. That's nice. Potassium, there's plenty. As I said in the previous section, phosphorus, 78 parts per million. That's by the Malic 3 extractant. That's plenty. Calcium is over 2,000 parts per million. That is ample. Magnesium, 275. That's plenty of magnesium. Sulfur is 10. That is also ample. So everything here is fine. This is not showing any neglect. So all of your
Okay.
maintenance of the lawn over the past 14 years, I should say congratulations. That's been very effective. So you're in a great place. Having a
Yeah.
soil condition like this is really good. You don't really need to change anything, and it's just a matter of let's try to grow the grass a little bit more and mow it frequently to make a nice dense turf.
Okay.
All right. And then we jump into the part that I like, which is the charts. And first, I show a plot legend here. So let's have a look at this. This is a plot legend. It's an example of what we'll see for the potassium chart. Um,
Mhm.
so I typically am working with clients where we have samples collected over time, generally once a year. And so I show sample dates. So we're looking at a timeline to see how nutrient levels have changed over time. And that would show different sampling dates. And then we've got blue numbers and blue points. So the blue number is the average on this date from this zone. So in your case, we'd be looking at the average between the front and the back lawn on a
Yep.
particular date. And then there are two horizontal lines. The MLSN value, and MLSN stands for minimum levels for sustainable nutrition. And MLSN is what I call a modern method for turfgrass soil test interpretation. So that's how I'm making a interpretation of your soil test results. And
Okay.
when I look at this, um, the minimum value is the MLSN value that we don't want to drop below. So that just is a kind of like a floor level that we want to make sure we don't drop below. And then the green horizontal line is a median value for this zone. So for lawns, I put them together with golf course rough. So I take all the samples in my database without including your lawn. So we're comparing to what's normal for lawns and for golf course rough because I classified those type of soils together. So
Okay.
let's look at what this shows like then when we look at your actual lawn. So we don't have the timeline now because we've just tested once, but I would like you to test again this autumn and we'll see kind of what the results have been. And if we continue this project, we will transition to sampling every autumn because I think autumn is the best time for sampling in this type of climate because it gives all winter. Uh, well, there's a few reasons why, but one of the main reasons why is because it gives us all winter to make a fertilizer plan for the next year. I
Right.
don't like sampling in the spring so much because it's a bit rushed because the grass
Yeah.
is already growing and we collect the samples and we have to quickly adjust our fertilizer plan based on the results. Whereas if we sample in September or October, you have 6 months to make a plan.
Right.
So um, your pH is just a little bit above average, which is fine. 7.2 on average is perfect. It's neutral. That's good. You have good nutrient availability. The soil organic matter is well above average, but that's good because this is a source of free nutrients, and having more soil organic matter helps to hold plant available water. Phosphorus on average is 78 parts per million, which is just slightly above average. The potassium also, you see it's slightly above average. And notice
Yep.
that it's way above these MLSN minimum values. So
Yeah.
you just have absolutely no concern about phosphorus deficiency this year, absolutely no concern about potassium deficiency this year. And we've looked at it now it gets a little bit more complicated. Do you see that chart on the left, the P saturation ratio, or PSR.
Yeah. Yep.
So this is an indication of the risk of phosphorus leaching or runoff from your lawn, because it's looking at not only the phosphorus but also the aluminum and the iron in the soil. And then it gives an indication of whether this soil can hold more phosphorus or whether the soil would be saturated with phosphorus, and any extra phosphorus that you add might just pass through the soil or wouldn't be held in the soil and could run off. And this is relatively low. If your value was zero point 0.2 or above, then I would say you've got a real risk of losing phosphorus from your lawn, which is an environmental risk. So if you do put a little bit of phosphorus, it's expected to stay in the soil, but it's just not necessary, and it might lead to more weeds. So that's why I'm recommending the ammonium sulfate.
Okay.
And then you collected these samples in April. And so I've calculated for the upcoming year, starting in May and then starting in May of this year, which is 1 month after your samples were collected, going through to April of next year, I'm estimating the nitrogen mineralization. This is based on your organic matter content. It's based on the starting organic matter of 5.5% in the soil, and it's based on your site-specific temperatures, and it's assuming that your lawn is irrigated or that it doesn't go into complete drought or that you have timely rainfall that keeps some soil moisture there. And what you see is you get a peak of mineralization that happens in July and in August, and that is about 1 gram of nitrogen per square meter, which is about 0.25 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per month. That's a substantial amount of nitrogen, and that's why I'm not making a
No
fertilizer
application.
recommendation in
Yeah.
July. And I'm kind of letting these accumulate, and let the grass use it. And then as we come into September, that mineralization goes down, and that's where I'm recommending your final fertilizer application of the year.
And so, Micah, you're saying as long as there's available water, rainfall, or whatever, how if what do I look for if there's not enough rain? How do I know if there's enough rain coming or not, or when to add some water on there
Mm.
myself? Do I just
Well,
wait till it's brown, or
we, I think that is a really good question, and we will have to talk in a completely different. Um, I think we can talk in in another
yeah,
episode, in another conversation, about how you should really deal with the irrigation, considering that you do have the ability to put a sprinkler on your lawn. You don't have an in-ground irrigation system.
correct? I do
Does
not.
your town ever put restrictions when you're in a drought? Do they put restrictions on home lawn irrigation?
Um, I don't think right now there is. They used to,
Mm-hmm.
but the restrictions were just limited use to certain day, um,
Okay.
like every other day type of thing. So it was still available, but it's never completely restricted. If that helps, to my knowledge. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and do you pay for the water?
Yes.
Right. So you you want to apply enough so that we achieve the desired results with the lawn, which is it looks good, it's not too much work for you, it's good for the kids to play,
Yep.
incites envy among people. People drive down your street just to look at your lawn, that kind of thing. That would be
Yeah.
nice.
That would be nice.
That would be nice. You're just like, man, why are all these cars slowing down and rolling down the windows and taking
Must be the
pictures when
lawn.
they're coming by?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
That would be
So
nice.
let me just completely dodge that question,
Yeah.
because
No, that's good.
irrigation is such a calm. It's simple, and we're gonna estimate your soil. I'm not going to completely dodge the question. I'll answer it here and say what I'm going to explain in detail in another long conversation that we'll have. What I think we will do is estimate your rooting depth, and we'll estimate the soil's ability to hold water. So we could say, for example,
Mhm.
that you might be able to hold 20 liters of water per square meter.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then we will expect that to be depleted at a rate of about 3 millimeters per day or something, which is about 3 liters of water per day per square meter. And I'll work through these calculations so you have an idea of the approximate amount of water that you may need to apply. And then we'll basically look at what happened with the rainfall.
Yep.
So that's called like a daily water balance. And if it rained a certain amount, you can kind of figure that your lawn doesn't need water because there's still that amount in the soil. But then if you go 7 or 10 days without any precipitation, we can start to predict at what time, at what date you may need to add some more water.
Okay.
And I'm also going to tell you the practical things to look for, like the grass is going to slow its growth,
Yep.
and you'll start to see footprints. So if you can see footprints and the grass doesn't bounce back
That's
from your
it.
foot when it's wilting like that, that's a clear indication that the grass would respond well to additional fertilizer. And it's just sorry, not fertilizer, water.
Water. Yep.
Water. We're talking about drought stress here. So in the back lawn around the corners, you can probably have some tolerance for the grass going dormant. And the grass
Right.
isn't going to die. It just will stop growing and eventually it won't be green anymore. In the front lawn, I suppose we'll try to prevent that from happening so that it looks
Yeah.
pretty good.
Okay.
Okay. So that
Yeah.
I'm going to that is a very good question, and I want to think about how I want to answer that
Sure.
clearly to someone such as you who typically do you irrigate? I mean, have you
I
irrigated in the
mean,
past?
I mean, I have in the past. I can't tell you the last time I did. Um, but yeah, there was a point in time where I did try to stay on top of it, but it felt like I was just cutting the grass more frequently, and then there were so many weeds at the time that it was
Yeah. So
just
the
so,
two things that make grass grow that are controlled by the turf manager are nitrogen fertilizer and water. Okay? So you can use those to your advantage, or you can do them to create more work for yourself by
yeah,
accident. We
yeah.
want you to use those to your advantage. I think that we will be able to do something where even in a dry summer, I think you'll be able to get away with only irrigating the lawn 3, 4, 5 times and still maintain. And so that's basically without
Yeah.
many thunderstorms, without much rain. In a typical summer, you may get some summers where you don't need to irrigate in your climate,
Mm,
but I will look up the weather data. We can do some simulations. That's the kind of thing that I do,
okay.
and I will explain it to you. And I've got an excellent video also from Oregon. In Oregon, it doesn't really rain in the summer. It rains in the winter. It doesn't rain in the summer. My turfgrass professor, Tom Cook, uh, I've got a video with him where I visited his lawn. We talked about the irrigation a little bit, and he's got a beautiful lawn that gets irrigated only 2 or 3 times in a typical summer, if I remember
Wow.
correctly. And
Wow.
I know there it's drier in the summer than it is where you are on average. But
Yeah.
we don't live in the average. We live in
Right.
something that is never average. And that's why you're either going to have a wetter than normal year or a drier than normal year.
Yeah.
And so we'll be prepared for the drier than normal year, and I'll make your irrigation recommendations based on that. But
Awesome.
it's been raining enough that you haven't had to think about that yet this year, have you?
No, no, no.
Okay.
Typically, I went in until midsummer when it gets hot and we
Hmm.
get quite a few hot days and that kind of thing, or period of time with no rain for a bit. So
Okay. Excellent. So that was the first page of the charts for the lawn zone. And then we get into on page 2, it's things that are less important. So it's secondary nutrients instead of macronutrients. So it's calcium. You can see calcium way above the average, way above the MLSN minimum. Magnesium also, there's plenty of it there. Sulfur, well above the MLSN minimum. So these are secondary nutrients. They're essential elements, but they're required in less quantity than phosphorus or potassium or
Right.
nitrogen. And then we get into sodium, which I'm using. It's not one that's typically a nutrient that we apply, but I'm using that as indication of salinity risk. And anything for cool season grass that's less than 100 parts per million is absolutely no worry. So we don't have a salinity risk in your lawn. And for the micronutrients, iron, manganese, copper, zinc, and boron, do you see they're all above average? They're
Yeah.
all above those green lines. So um,
That's good, right?
that's good. That's good. And when you start doing soil testing over time, which most of my clients do, then we can see what these trends are. So we can start seeing, are my micronutrients going up over time or are they going down over time? And you see that with micronutrients, with secondary nutrients, with pH, with organic matter. And that trend over time is really an excellent assessment of what the results of your work have been, and you can then adjust your work based on whether things in the soil are going up or going down.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we can just skip this appendix about the report unless you have any particular questions. I'm just, giving the equation for that phosphorus
Yeah.
saturation ratio
Yeah.
and that sort of thing, for example. And I explain about sodium, and I give the reference for how I've made that predicted nitrogen mineralization, and so that is that's something that you can read at your leisure and let me know if you have any questions. And
Okay.
then here's just the results from Brookside Labs. So these are just numbers, and if you're interested in looking at the exact numbers, then I provide this for reference. And there's actually even more information here than what I presented in the charts and what I summarized for you. But I've certainly written about all the important stuff. So here you've got units of kilograms per hectare and parts per million, and we looked at the plant available nitrogen in these samples also. So the nitrate and the ammonium was in the very normal range, less than 5 parts per million for each, less than 10 parts per million if we sum them together. That's really normal. Because grasses are very efficient at taking nitrogen from the soil. You've got grass growing in your lawn, so it's expected that the plant available nitrogen
Right.
would be low. And we did some additional tests
Okay.
because you're located in a part of Canada that would typically do some ammonium acetate testing. So I checked these nutrients. Well, let's go look at the phosphorus also. We'll go back. We also, because of the pH of your soil, we did the Olsen extractant for phosphorus also. So I've talked about
Mm-hmm.
Malic 3, where you had your front lawn was at 63 parts per million, your back lawn was at 92. The Olsen extractant is a zero point 0.5 molar sodium bicarbonate extractant, which you can drop into dinner conversation or talk about with the parent. You can talk about this with parents at the soccer, on the sideline and be like, I wonder if this field has enough phosphorus. Maybe they should test it with sodium bicarbonate, half molar. You might know it as the Olsen extractant. Yeah, so
Yep.
that
Yep. I think that
that
might
would
go
go
over well.
over well. So anyway, so Olsen works really good in soils of your region. So I wanted to make sure that we had that just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So basically, these are about 3 times higher than the MLSN minimum if we use Olsen. So
Okay.
so if you were down around 5 parts per million, 6 parts per million on this Olsen test, then I would say, okay, maybe you need some phosphorus, but you are at 16 and 23. So you got ample phosphorus. Again, no need to apply phosphorus this year. So there's lots of information there.
Nice.
And we did these ammonium acetate extractants. So we're testing for calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and sulfur again, with a different extraction method. And these also come back very ample, very ample. So you don't, it's just something that confirms that we don't need to add these. And I did an additional test, which is a 24-hour incubation where the soil is mixed with water and kept at the lab temperature for 24 hours. And it's done in a jar that's sealed, so you, as the microbes are breaking down the soil organic matter for 24 hours, they release carbon dioxide, and we measure how much carbon dioxide was released in a 24-hour burst of microbial activity. And this is a way to get an indication of how biologically active those soils are and how much carbon there is in the soil, how much organic matter there is in the soil that the microbes can actually use. And these are good numbers, and it corresponds with your front lawn having slightly higher levels than your back lawn. So
That's
yeah,
interesting.
it's interesting. This is the first time I've run one of these tests. I want to check this again in
Okay.
the future. So basically, I'm trying to get some baseline information. But that does match with your front lawn having slightly higher organic matter content than your back lawn did. So in the future, if we would ever treat these differently, we would actually put a little bit less nitrogen fertilizer on your front lawn and a little bit more on your back lawn. For this year, I don't want to make that I don't want to do anything different yet. So let's go ahead and treat your
Right.
front lawn and your
I got
back lawn the same this year. And then if we test this again and we evaluate the turf grass response, we may get a little bit
you.
more
Yeah.
advanced in the future. And then the
Okay.
final section, the final part of the appendix, is a site temperature summary. And
That's my favorite chart to look at, Micah.
Well, I think it's nice to show this because I have access to this type of information, and I have programs on my computer that I can get this information and then make these charts. So we can look at your highest temperature, your lowest temperature, your dew point, which has some impact on how comfortable you'll feel, and also what the disease risk would be for the grass. Um, and and that the average temperature is what we're using for a lot of the mineralization calculations and the growth calculations. So, and
Right.
this is geolocated just to your site. I'm using weather company data here. So this is from the weather company API, and this is on Apple phones. They bought Dark Sky. So I used to use Dark Sky, um, and now that's something that Apple has, and I haven't signed up to get access to that right now. So I'm using Weather Company, but we're basically looking at
Okay.
hourly historical weather data, and it's the same type of thing that
Perfect.
you'd be looking at on your phone. So all the apps on your phone are using these, basically.
That
Yeah, they're
data.
using this
Yeah.
kind of data. So it's pretty cool.
It's
Yeah,
very neat. Yeah,
it
it's
is
very cool.
cool. So I kind of like try to step through these. So we start off with these averages. So we're looking at the high temperature, the low temperature, and the average. And then from the average, we can do a lot of things. One thing that I did is looked at your average temperature this year compared to the average of the past 3 years. And you can see that this line tracks pretty closely. So at the time I made the report,
Mhm.
in mid May or 2/3 of the way through May, you were pretty much tracking on average. In early April, you had a bit of above average weather, temperature wise, and
Yes.
then it was kind of tracking on average through May. And then
Yep.
from that, we can do something really cool called the turfgrass growth potential. And the growth potential converts the temperature data to something that's on a scale from 0 to 1. So now, if you look at the blue line, you're in a cool season grass area. Your blue line is always above the red line. Red line is how we would expect warm season grasses to grow. But you're in a cool season area,
Okay.
and you can see that it reaches a peak in June, and then you get temperatures that are a little bit too hot for optimal growth in July and August, so it dips down. And then it comes up in August and peaks again. So it's right about 1, which means like 100%. That's right at the optimum for growth, and then it goes down in the winter to 0 again. So instead of the temperature curve, this is now like sort of like a predicted growth curve based on growth potential.
I
So
see.
this
Yep.
is something that we can then link to fertilizer use. And so one thing that we can do,
That's why
go ahead.
I was gonna say that's why there's no application in July and August, Micah,
Well,
because
it's
um,
there. I'm going to show that on the very last chart. One of the reasons is because we don't want the grass to grow so much when the temperatures are above optimum for growth. But the other reason
right.
is because that's when you have the peak nitrogen mineralization. And so
Yeah,
the
right.
grass is already being supplied with plenty. And that's why I'm trying to apply the nitrogen in June when we have this peak growth potential. We're also applying just before. I'm recommending August 20, which is right before this
Yeah,
September peak in growth potential, and also right after it. So we're trying to make sure that the grass is well supplied with nitrogen when the temperatures are just at an optimum for growth. That means your photosynthesis is going to be most effective. You're going to be able to
effective.
capture the most amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and the grass is going to store that as carbohydrates inside the plant, put it down into the roots, and make a really healthy grass plant. So that's kind of where that timing of your nitrogen applications is coming from.
Nice.
And
Okay.
we'll skip this one because this is like a cumulative. But I mean, I'll let you look at that yourself. I want to talk
Yeah.
about this chart here. So this is kind of the key
Okay.
one, the expected monthly nitrogen use, mineralization, and fertilizer requirement. So I'm showing this green line. This is predicted nitrogen use from that growth potential curve for your site. So there's a peak in
Mhm.
June, and then it dips down in July and August. It goes up a little bit in September, and then it goes down to nothing in the winter. But also this darker green line at the bottom, this is showing your mineralization, predicted nitrogen mineralization from soil organic matter. And that one has a peak in
Yeah.
July and August, and you're getting more than a gram of nitrogen mineralized from this predicted model, more than 1 gram of nitrogen per square meter per month in both June and July and in August. So that's why your fertilizer amount that I'm recommending goes down a little bit. And
Okay.
basically, what I'm trying to do is let your fertilizer applications be a um, like not apply the fertilizer before the grass can use it, but more be like a replenishment type of thing, because
I
I'm
see.
very sensitive to not having to mow the grass too much. And I'm afraid that if you put
I'm also
fertilizer,
sensitive.
right? So I don't want you putting fertilizer that you're applying before the grass can use it. I'm using this model to predict that your lawn in your temperatures is going to use the nitrogen like this, and as the nitrogen gets used up to a certain amount, which I'm using about a half pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, or 2.5 grams of nitrogen per square meter. Once it's used about that amount, I want you to replenish it, to resupply it. And I think that's going to going to be
Yeah.
an effective way to do it instead of constantly supplying it in advance, and that's sort of like forcing the grass to grow. I'd rather
Mm.
be on the back end of this rather than on the front end. And as
Yeah.
we can see, I mean, this is not, you don't need a scientist or somebody with a PhD in turf grass to tell you this, because you can look at your lawn right now. You've mowed it 3 times this year. It's green. It's
Yeah.
growing with no nitrogen fertilizer. So if we're trying to get ahead of things and just fertilizing it more, it's pointless. I
Yeah.
think. So definitely you could increase your mowing, but um, I think, could you keep track of how many times you mow the lawn this year? Let's
Sure.
just
Yep.
put a whiteboard in your garage, or put a
Yeah.
maintenance, because typically for machines we'll keep track of when the oil's been changed, when the blades have been sharpened. So maybe you could just have a very basic notebook in on the workbench in your garage or something, and just keep track of how many times you mow the lawn,
Sure.
because uh, that for me is where this could all go wrong, is if we force you to mow the lawn too much, because you got a substantial lawn. I don't know if you know the size off the top of your head, but you
It's
will measure it, right?
yeah. I'll measure the square footage of seed lawn. The lot. I mean, the lot's big enough that if you're gonna make me mow it more frequently, I'm gonna have to ask you to talk to your sister about
Helping.
investing into a ride-on mower for me. But
Uh-huh.
we'll cross that bridge when we're in the middle of this to see how many times I have to mow.
Well, what's the time requirement to mow the lawn one time when you collect clippings, when you bag the clippings?
Oh, um, I can maybe tell you now.
You mowed it today?
I think I mowed it today, but I don't know if I tracked it. I'm gonna say front and back probably about an hour,
Yeah. So that's a huge time commitment.
maybe 45 minutes if I'm
It,
lucky. But
and is that
I'll,
mostly
I'll
mowing
track
time?
it. I'll track it the next time for sure, Micah, so I know for sure.
Okay,
Is that
thank
what?
you.
Sorry.
Well, is that just mowing time, or are you spending a lot of time emptying the bag of the mower?
I mean, I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it. So, I mean, I wouldn't say a lot of time emptying the bag, but there are three good size bags of clippings on my driveway right now. So, um, that are going
So
to be in my truck and I'll take away tomorrow. But
okay. Well, we're
yeah,
going to
there.
try to minimize that. But definitely we want to be on the back end of this. So we want to those clippings have a lot of nitrogen in it, and we are
We
uh,
like that.
well, we like that, and we need to apply enough nitrogen to have a really dense turf, and we'll minimize some of the weeds that way. But you'll definitely could increase your mowing requirement by over applying nitrogen. So let's keep
Yeah.
track of this, and
Yeah. We'll keep track of
try
it.
not to mess it up.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Sounds good.
it's really good. We can now manage that lawn with a lot of confidence now that we know what the soil pH is, and we know what the soil organic matter content is. We're very confident that we don't need to apply potassium, don't need to apply phosphorus, you don't need to apply
That's
magnesium.
good.
It's going to be fine. So this is all going to be about mowing, irrigation, and timely nitrogen applications.
Yeah. So
And
next steps, I will track down that fertilizer and also measure out the lawn dimensions so I know how much space I have and I can do that calculation properly, right?
that's exactly right. That's what I
Perfect.
would like you to do. So
Okay.
please, but we've still got. I said about June 10th, so we've still got a couple weeks
Yeah.
for you to get that ready, and you'll probably mow it a couple more times, and yeah,
Yeah.
good. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully it's fun. Is it fun trying to make the lawn better?
I gotta admit it is fun because I feel like it's gonna be better and I'm excited for that. So I'm hoping the results are good. But just having the data from this report is it's got a good feeling because I feel like I feel like it's gonna be good. So
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad I was able to get that done for you, and that you collected those samples so well, and got those sent in. And it's certainly a good soil. It's a
good.
good soil condition to produce good turf. And the problem is, to have good turf, you need to mow it.
Yeah,
And on a lawn of your size with a walking mower, that is just a time commitment.
I get my steps in. That's okay.
Yeah.
If that's the main sacrifice for a nice green lush lawn, I'm willing to do that. So
Okay. Do you know how many times in a year in the past you would mow? I mean, is it once a week, once every 2 weeks? Do
at
you
least one,
remember?
no, no, at least once a week, but most like I would probably keep. I'd probably cut the lawn a bit lower than I probably should have.
Mm,
To be honest with you, because I kind of liked it like that. So I would say that when it's growing well, like 4 or 5 days would be when I need to. I maybe always didn't do it in 5, or I'd say 5 or 6 days. Just shy of one that weekly.
mm-hmm,
Like if I saved it for every weekend, it would get long a
mm-hmm.
lot of times. So sometimes I'd have to go, if I mowed it on a Saturday, like a Wednesday or Thursday, it would need it again, kind of thing, to maintain that nice height that I wanted. Um,
And
but
what do you
when things
estimate that
are
height? What were you mowing it in the past? Less than
like
like 1 inch?
less than, I'm not sure the actual thing. I just know my lawnmower setting on my wheels is how I was going by, and yeah.
Okay. Well,
So
we're
actual height, I'm not really sure, but it was a bit shorter than it is now. Not too much, but a little bit. And
okay.
then
Well, at this higher height of cut, you're going to have to mow it less frequently. So I'm going to try to do everything I can to make it good looking, good for the grass, bad for the weeds, and not too much mowing for you. So we'll
yeah,
try to just hit
that
that.
sounds awesome.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you for doing that
Thanks, Micah.
review with me. And we will check back again. We're going to have to talk about irrigation. We're going to have to see how that first fertilizer application goes.
That's
And we're
right.
going to have to monitor this mowing. So, this ATC at home series with your lawn improvement project is going to continue, and we'll see what type of results we get. Thank you.
Can't wait.
I'm going to go get some cow moo dang now.
I'm so jealous.
You get some poutine or whatever
I,
whatever.
I will. I will.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm jealous too. Thanks, Nathan. Good talking with you. Catch up
Thanks a lot,
again.
Mike. Appreciate
Okay.
it. Bye.
Bye-bye.